It's hard to think of a single genre in the history of this medium that has enjoyed the kind of resurgence that Metroidvanias have. Popularized by the likes of Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Metroidvanias were quite niche for a long time. But over the last decade or so, thanks to the efforts of incredibly talented indie developers and a few major AAA studios, Metroidvanias are now a dime a dozen, and have become so popular that even games that don't commit fully to the genre end up using elements of it. In this feature, we'll be talking about what we feel have been the 15 best Metroidvania games over the last few years. Given how spoilt for choice we are, it goes without saying that we'll be missing out on a few games, so do sound off about those in the comments below. So let's kick this off and begin with the most obvious choice. Hollow Knight. To say that Hollow Knight is not only one of the best games of the last few years, but quite simply one of the greatest games ever made would not be an exaggeration in the slightest. Team Cherry's masterpiece exudes a breathtaking level of confidence in everything it does, from the crisp combat, the incredible atmosphere, and the tight platforming, to the labyrinthine map design, the charming visuals, and the memorable boss fights. It's the standard that all Metroidvania games should aspire to, and stands toe-to-toe with genre giants like Super Metroid. BLOODSTAINED Ritual of the Night. As the man behind the revolutionary Castlevania Symphony of the Night, there aren't a lot of people who have had as much of an impact as Koji Igarashi has. So it makes sense that his passion project, a spiritual successor to that game, is an accomplished benchmark release for the genre. BLOODSTAINED Ritual of the Night feels like a cozy homecoming, with tight level design, a map that is a joy to traverse, and an enjoyable combat and progression system that makes even grinding a lot of fun. It's not a revolutionary game by any means, but it understands what makes a Metroidvania game work, and is, as such, a must-play for all fans of the genre. Dust: An Elysian Tale. Dust: An Elysian Tale is one of the oldest entries in this list, and came at a time when the Metroidvania resurgence was still in its infancy. And so, when it came out, it was exactly the kind of game many people had been craving for years. Characterized by beautiful visuals, a ton of content, and diverse environments, Dust immediately endeared itself to a lot of people. It wasn't without its issues. Its combat and RPG mechanics certainly had plenty of room for improvement, but it was, by and large, a solid game. Metroid: Samus Returns. Well, of course there was going to be a Metroid game and a feature about Metroidvania titles. When Samus Returns came out for the 3DS in 2017, it had been 8 years since the last major Metroid game's release. And no, we're not counting Other M and Federation Force, because why would we? And even longer since the last 2D Metroid, that being 2004's Zero Mission. So for fans of the series, playing Metroid Samus Returns was like finding a cool and clear lake in the middle of a hot and scorching desert. Was it perfect? Well, no, but it was Metroid in its purest form, and that's a beautiful thing. Dead Cells. Combining roguelikes and Metroidvanias, Dead Cells is nothing short of genius. Through its roguelike elements, it manages to inject a heavy dose of variety and replayability into every second of the experience, so that players are always going for just one more run. Through its Metroidvania elements, it implements an engaging and addictive progression and design ingenuity that makes every second of the game feel like a meaningful march forward. It is a game unlike any other, and hopefully one that more games in the future will take cues from. SteamWorld Dig 2. In spite of the deluge of Metroidvanias in recent years, very few have displayed as solid of an understanding of the genre's ins and outs and its greatest strengths the way SteamWorld Dig 2 does. It takes an already solid foundation laid down by its predecessor and then hones it to perfection. From its varied combat, inventive puzzles, and tight platforming to its meticulously crafted world and rewarding exploration, SteamWorld Dig 2 is a masterclass in game design from beginning to end. Owlboy. There's a lot to like about Owlboy. Its beautiful pixel art makes its world come to life in stellar fashion, while its charming cast of characters and surprising thematic richness elevate its story to great heights. As a Metroidvania, it isn't quite as accomplished, but is a solid game nonetheless, thanks to well-designed dungeons and some of the most memorable combat encounters we've ever been a part of in a game of this kind. In the end, its strengths lie in storytelling and presentation than they do anywhere else, but the net result is the same. This is a game that you should not miss out on. Control. Only the geniuses at Remedy Entertainment could come up with something like this. Something so vivid, so bonkers, so ambitious, and yet so well executed. Control is a trip from start to finish, a game dotted with some of the most evocative sights and sounds you'll ever find in a video game, or any medium for that matter. Winding and interconnected level design is contextualized in constantly bizarre ways. The combat is always an absolute blast, thanks to Jesse's telekinetic powers, and the story is a complete roller coaster ride. It's Remedy's best game ever, and for a studio of their caliber, that's very high praise indeed. Axiom Verge. If you ever needed to show someone a blueprint for what a Metroidvania game should be like, Axiom Verge would be the game to turn to. Proudly displaying its love for 2D Metroid games and how much it's influenced by them, Axiom Verge is, in many ways, the purest, most unadulterated distillation of this genre and its qualities. Rewarding progression, a stellar map, a surprisingly good story, challenging combat and boss encounters, and tight movement and platforming combined to make Axiom Verge a game that is, in many ways, better than the ones that inspired it. GUACAMELEE 2. The gleefully bright and vibrant aesthetic and charmingly silly setting and tone of GUACAMELEE 2 and its predecessor are enough to make anyone fall in love with it, but there's so much more that makes this game good. Combat is always an absolute blast, thanks to Juan's vast and varied repertoire of moves. Its humor rarely ever misses a beat, the visuals are nothing short of beautiful, and platforming is challenging and inventive. It is, in many ways, the perfect sequel, because it understands what worked so well in its predecessors and then strives to make that stuff even better through small but meaningful improvements. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. A spiritual successor of the Wonder Boy series, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom is everything that it needs to be: colorful, charming, and thoughtfully designed. Every animal that we play as feels unique and fleshed out, and the way all of their unique and varied abilities are put to use in navigation, platforming, and combat feels constantly innovative. Monster Boy makes sure that the player never feels bored, never feels like things are becoming too samey or too generic, and there's not enough praise in the world for a game that can manage something that crucial as effectively as this one does. Ori and the Blind Forest. What can we say about Moon Studios' beautiful masterpiece that millions of others haven't already said before? Ori and the Blind Forest is a revelation. There's no two ways about it. It's a beautiful, moving adventure that captures the imagination right from the get-go. Exploring the forest is a constant joy thanks to immaculate design and rewarding progression, while seeing the game's story play out is a treat unto itself. All of that, combined with challenging and enjoyable platforming, wonderful music, and gorgeous art design, come together to easily outweigh the few issues the game does have. Salt and Sanctuary. Salt and Sanctuary is a labor of love. With its haunting art and eerie atmospheric music, it immediately establishes a sense of place, always a great thing in Metroidvania games. It's also a riff on the Dark Souls style of games, except in 2D, and at this point it's more notable when a game isn't a Dark Souls clone, to be honest. But rather than wallowing in the shadows of its inspiration, it rises to become something wholly unique and captivating. TIMESPINNER. Having launched at a time when Metroidvanias had become the most popular that they had ever been, TIMESPINNER was sort of lost in the crowd, and as such did not get nearly as much attention as it deserves. Some truly unique mechanics help this game's traversal and exploration stand out even among the crowd, while fun combat and a surprisingly engaging story deserve a lot of praise as well. TIMESPINNER isn't faultless, and is certainly hurt by a short runtime and some ideas that it doesn't properly flesh out, but for fans of the Metroidvania genre, this is definitely a game worth looking into. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. EA's run with Star Wars has been, well, less than great. True, they eventually managed to turn Battlefront 2 around, but its launch was mired with backlash and controversy. It's also the case that people have wanted a new single-player narrative-driven Star Wars epic for years now, much like what we used to get not all that long ago, and many of which EA apparently was working on and then canceled. So Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order had a lot riding on it. It managed to live up to most of those expectations, in part due to the sheer subversion of expectations. The makers of Titanfall making a single-player Star Wars action-adventure game, and it's a Dark Souls clone. Oh, and a Metroidvania too. But it worked. Bugs and glitches pervaded the experience, to be fair, but the actual game design part was great. It's not the strongest Metroidvania game on this list, but it's certainly one of the most accessible ones. And hey, anything that makes more people experience the glory of this genre is fine by us. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.